Welcome to Tambellini Group's Women in Technology Spotlight Series. In these monthly interviews, we're showcasing the accomplishments, career paths, and perspectives of the remarkable women leading higher education strategy today. And today we are lucky enough to be joined by Andrea Ballinger. She is the Vice Provost and CIO at Oregon State University. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, Liz. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're so lucky to have you. And I think what I wanted to start off with, our typical first question that I like to ask is, what did you want to be when you grew up and why?
I love this question, Liz. So I need to give a little context. So you're going to notice that I have an accent. So was born in America, but I'm a product of Brazilian Italians. So Brazilian Italians, if you've met them, you know that they're strong people, but they like to compete. And in my family, a family of six, it was no different. So this question about what we wanted to do, what we wanted to be when we grew up, it was a dinner conversation for my parents early in life. And it became a competition. I want to be this, I want to be that, but it really was not based on anything concrete. So my father, a geneticist, a scientist, kind of challenged us to find our own gifts. We had no idea what that meant. You know, today we do, but we didn't at that point. And he would say, go try stuff that scare you and figure it out. Can you get some bruises when you try things? And we were like, what? Bruises? You need to fail. You need to fail often and figure out what you like and dislike. And then he would tell stories about us when we were young. And I need to share this with you because it will tell, it's a foundation of who I am. So apparently when I was 10 months old, I was not eating and my parents could not get me to eat. I'm number 2 out of the 6. So I'm sitting in a high chair. My mom is force feeding me and it's not working. Doorbell rings. She goes to take care of the doorbell. She comes back and I have food everywhere. I'm happy as a go lucky. I have food everywhere. And my mom used that as saying, this is a foundation of one of your gifts. You have to try it out. You have to do it your way. So that was a way that they did for each one of us 6. So I did not know what I wanted to be. They started to actually asking us, figured out what your gifts are, and then collect those gifts and you find a career that you want to do it, use all those gifts on. And then my father later in life, like close to high school, started putting some seeds on my brain and to me was becoming a doctor.
Okay. So did you have any specific type of medical interest at that time or specific type of doctor you wanted to be?
No, it was my father saying, your gifts are leaning you towards finding solutions. He's a scientist and so a geneticist. So to him, it was finding solutions for the problems of the world and looking at the healthcare at that time was what he thought I could do the best.
And you have now obviously risen in a very different field. So can you tell us a little bit about your career path, how you went from being that child who wanted to be a doctor to becoming a CIO at a large public institution?
Yes. So while I was proceeding high school, looking for taking the exams in Brazil, I was in Brazil at that time. And in Brazil is a very different set of tests that you have to take to get into college. So while I was preparing for that, my parents actually relocated to Illinois. My father is a very worldly renowned scientist, so he was there working with them. And I stayed behind because I'm in the middle of this, getting into medical school. And while doing this, my father said after the second year, I need you to come to Illinois. He saw something in Illinois. So I put my studies at hold in Brazil, came to Illinois, and fell in love with the institution. And I was like, Dad, can I not transfer here? I'm an American. I was born here. Can I not go to school here? And he said, oh, let's go talk to that. I didn't know who they were, but now I know advisors, right?
Right.
The advisors looked at my transcript, say, you can do whatever you want. But let's take a aptitude test. I have no clue what that is. And my English at that time, Liz, was really, really poor. It's not as good 35 years later, but it's still, it was bad at that time, even though it was my first language. And I took the test, not the TOEFL test. I took the regular ACT test and scored so high in math and physics because, those are international language. You don't need to know what the English part is. Of course, bombed it in English. And then they said to my dad sitting there, said, she really should be on exact sciences. I said, what does that mean? My dad said, oh, math, computer science. I'm like, yuck, I don't want to be in those things. And then the advisor said, you can also do finance. Finance is money. And I was like, oh, I like that. I think I can play with that. So started going to school and ended up getting a finance and an MBA. But my parents obviously were not from here. They moved back to Brazil. My father said, do you want to stay or go? And I said, I'm going to stay. I'm going to try to do that, but I'm going to do it my way. Remember that story I told you about, eating on my own? So I said, if you pay for school, I will find a way of paying for my stay. So I got a job at a bank and I started learning about money and finances. So it's not conventional path, Liz, but it was my way of, while going to school, trying out things to see where I went. So it became, I got involved in mergers and acquisitions of banks, where you get to see the technology. That's where the technology came to my mind. And then, after that, it was easy enough to figure out what I wanted to do.
So then how did you go from the banks to institutions? I mean, having something, a concentration or an interest in finance doesn't necessarily translate to, I want to work in academe.
No, actually, if you look at it, that piece that I mentioned, unconventional, what it did is the banking gave me the mergers and acquisitions. When you're doing that work, you're actually assessing people, processes, and technologies of the banks that you're trying to purchase. Because I worked for the bank that was purchasing those banks. So I would see that people matter. I would see that the processes matter. But what really made a difference between banks being efficient or not was the technology. So I love that. So my alma mater, University of Illinois, there was Y2K. Do you remember that? Not too many people remember Y2K.
Oh, yes.
I was there. So I was presenting, because I belonged to the Illinois Bankers Association at that point, and I was presenting about what was real, what was not. No, the cars are not going to fall from the sky, but there are some issues that you have to deal with, because I was working on them. And the chancellor of the university happened to be in the audience. And he approached me after that and said, hey, your alma mater's calling. Can you not come and help us figure out this Y2K? And I said, with all due respect, Mr. Chancellor, I had no idea what a chancellor was, Liz. With all due respect, I'm working mergers and acquisitions, and in a way, I said, it's very exciting, and academia is not seeing it. It's seen like a Titanic. It doesn't move very much. And right. He said, I will give you carte blanche. I will build a team around you. Let's do that. So I went to my husband. I said, okay, the bank is asking me to go to a different state, or I have this opportunity to jump into higher ed. He actually looked at me as if I was from another planet. He said, it's a very different, it's not going to go as fast as you do. So I took a leap of faith, and it has been, Liz, absolutely the right path for me. So that's how I got into academia.
So that's definitely a very unconventional route. And one of the things I love about doing these interviews is hearing all the different ways people ended up in these roles. And no one ever said I wanted to be a CIO when I grew up.
So true.
You say you loved it. So I'm wondering if you can describe that through the lens of like, what does a week in the life of your role as vice provost and CIO look like? And what about that keeps you so engaged in the field?
So the reality is that higher education, doesn't matter what size of institution you have. We are cities. We have all kinds of businesses inside of a higher ed. That's what excites me. I'm one of those people that do not like status quo, Liz. So I would get bored very easily. I am a high energy. I want to be thinking about what is next and optimizing what we have and then trying new things. If I were in the industry, if I were only in banking or in sales of whatever product, I would get bored with that. Higher ed gives us a plethora of issues, opportunities to actually deal with. It has to be the right people on this side, on the CIO side, to address that. Because sometimes it can feel like the world is coming at you with so many different problems and opportunities. But what I love about it is that there are some things that are standard in my job today. But keep in mind, I've been in the industry and a CIO for a long time. It has changed. My role has changed depending on the maturity of the institution and depending on the teams that I have. But my job today is actually terrific. I spend a great deal of time dreaming. What is it that's opportunity for the next steps? What are other people doing? Not just higher ed, because I watch very closely what the private sector does, because they tend to move a lot faster than us. What are the opportunities that we have? And then the second thing I keep a lot of time doing is listening. Boots on the ground, talking to the deans, talking to the associate deans, talking to the frontline staff, my staff, and figuring out, what is it that they're talking about? I'm not looking for technology solutions at that point, just trying to figure it out. Then you're invited to tables. I am invited to tables to discuss strategy at the institution. My gosh, how exciting is that? And then for them to see IT, in my 30 years in the field, IT now is not just that resource center that is a cost center in the background. We have to be at the table to discuss it, and it's very exciting. Then you have the other things that you deal with that are exciting to me. most is coaching and finding, those individuals that are hungry for growth and people that really want to find their own gifts and get their own bruises and giving them opportunities. Nothing excites me more than to hear that they become, deputy CIOs, CIOs, or whatever it is that they wanted to be, CISOs. A lot of the people that I work with become CISOs. I don't know. There might be something in my brain here that is helping that. But that is exciting to me. The tedious part of the job, the operations and then the funding and then making sure those things, that's part of all of our jobs. And does it excite me every day? No, it doesn't excite me, but it is part of my job, specifically the funding part.
Yes, it is unfortunately a part of everyone's job, I think, for profit, nonprofit.
So true.
We aren't volunteers. You mentioned dreaming being part of your job and that you spent a lot of time also looking at what's going on in the private sector. They tend to be a bit ahead on things. So with that in mind, I'm wondering if you can share with us a project that you're working on, maybe that was inspired by that dreaming or those other examples or both that you're particularly proud of, that's either currently in progress or has already been implemented.
So I have two that I'm thinking about, and my staff is going to freak out right now, but my teams, they know one of them. I have implemented 12 ERPs in my lifetime, and I think I'm tired of implementing ERPs.
Oh, wow.
And now with the fact that, I need to move to a more modern set of tools, and there are no ERPs that actually answer all the needs that I have in all higher ed right now. You're probably hearing the news, some of them that are backing out of some of the deployments. I want to do something different, Liz. So my dream right now, and where I'm spending a lot of time on guiding my team, is to look for other ways for us to actually create the best solutions for higher ed. How can we find, and I'm not talking about hybrid, that is an old approach. Composable would be great, but we're not there yet. But can we use something like a service delivery mechanism instead of doing, the full ERP for these things? On the student modules, I don't see a way yet. But on the finance and on the HR, private sector companies do. Some of them are global companies, they do. How do they do that? And we are much smaller than that. Can we not do it? So that is exciting to me. So we're in the process right now because our instance, our ERP is 33 years old. So we need to actually move into something else. And then the second piece is on the data. My love in, I think it started in banking, using data, using facts to actually make decisions. And this is where my career in higher ed actually started to grow on the business intelligence side, is seeing how can we, without creating those physical structures, use data on the fly, again, like private sector does, right? So not doing the big warehouses, even the virtual data warehouses, but something even more exciting. So those are the two that I am envisioning and dreaming about. It's going to take a little bit of work because those are risky propositions, especially because others have not done it. But I'm pursuing that right now, Liz, making sure that we have an opportunity really get to that optimization of the cost component of IT so we can actually flourish and deliver on the strategic vision that the institution wants that they can't do without us.
That's a big dream that you have.
I know, right?
Sounds like it could take years to go on, especially when you've got such an old system as well. The change management aspect and all of that will certainly be a big part of that going forward, and all that data aggregation and even finding it sometimes.
So true.
So with all the stuff in mind and all your plan for the future, if you could have a genie from the future come and answer one question for you about the direction or outcomes in higher education, technology uses and applications, what would you want to know?
Seriously, I would want to know what can I do back then to make sure that the culture is ready for the rapid adoption of technology that is required by us today. So what can I do? I would not be asking, is higher ed going to be ready for that very rapid development of technologies? We tend in technology in higher ed to look at solutions that are going to be almost like a return on investment. Can we keep this for the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? As opposed to saying, what do we have available to us that is going to be the step on the right direction so that allows us to change if we need to change tools, but it keeps us moving forward. What can we do in that way? And then you keep the institution, including the stakeholders and the folks using the technologies, aware that we're always changing. There's an institution in the country that I think is phenomenal, that they got there. The institution and everybody that works there knows you like pick a tool. You like Tableau today, tomorrow is going to be something different. You like, Banner today, tomorrow is going to be different. It's not the tool that matters, it's what you're able to do it. So I'll be asking this, Jeannie, what can we do then? Because I would have done a lot more myself to help provoke the conversations, both locally and nationally, on how do we get the culture ready so that we can move fast, because the technology is moving even faster today, and take advantage of those things that are going to help us really be the institutions that we say we want to be.
That there's so much in there about change and managing it, and I'm sure there's some hindsight bias too, right? It's 2020,
Correct.
and you can say, "Gosh, if only I had known this was coming." With hindsight bias in mind, I'm curious also to hear, what is the best piece of advice that you've received from a mentor or someone else in the technology field? And this can be obviously universally applicable advice, but part of the reason we do this series is we want to provide more women with a pathway for considering these careers and other things. So particularly as a female leader in this field, be interested to hear what you've learned from others and what advice you would give.
One and one only, and there's a lot to unpack on that, is leadership matters.
Okay.
Leadership is not a title. It is not just an office in a special parking lot or a recognition by others that you are the boss. You have to actually be, in my opinion, you have to be as authentic as you can in your own way, but get the information and the data points, all of that, and learn how to consume quickly and act on it. Because that action has to take place every day. It is not just, oh, I have a project, I need to do an approval, or I need to put together a budget for a project. It's daily. Every action and interaction that you're having is you using that leadership component in, and then building people behind you. This is important to me because remember those bruises that my father asked us to have. I use all of the bruises that I have because I have plenty of them. This will be a fun kind of exercise. How many bruises do you have, and how many of them? This has helped me go through at least one very epic failure in my career. It created that brain power, that brain security, I'm going to call it, that told me that I was resilient, that no matter what I would, because I stayed authentic to myself, right? So I would strongly encourage, figure out who you are and then act on it every day. You don't have to act like Liz or like Andrea or another CIO that you might know. But learn from it and then figure it out for yourself. How does that relate and align so that you can put your head on a pillow every night and say, hey, I acted on my own. Even if I got any bruises, I acted, I learned something from it, and I'm going to move forward.
It's hard. I mean, we all know that we learn more from our failures than our successes, but it can be hard to go through those, even though you do learn a lot in the end. And I appreciate you too sharing, being honest about having big failures and and using those as learning experiences. It's so valuable for us. As they say, experience is the best teacher.
So true.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today to share all your insights and stories with us. We really appreciate having you.
My pleasure, Liz. Thank you so much.